Welcome to This Explainer. We're jumping right into a massive, rapidly unfolding legal battle today. We're looking at a huge clash between a coalition of 25 U.S. states and the Trump administration over some really sweeping new global tariffs. If you've been tracking trade policy lately, you know this is an absolutely crucial moment. So we're going to break down the facts, neutrally examine the legal arguments from both sides of the aisle, and look at the broader economic ripples this whole thing is causing. Let's get right into it. It really all boils down to this one foundational legal question, which is right at the heart of a major lawsuit just filed in the U.S. Court of International Trade in New York. Can a president unilaterally tariff the globe? Think about that for a second. We aren't talking about taxing a single product or singling out one specific country. This is about the sheer scope of executive power when it comes to global commerce. This lawsuit is basically testing the absolute limits of what a president can do on their own without Congress stepping in. So, Section 1, the new global tariffs. Let's look at what actually happened. Back on July 24th, the Trump administration officially dropped some sweeping new import duties. We're looking at two specific tiers here, 10% and 12.5%. Now, these aren't your typical surgically applied duties on, say, a couple of niche tech products. No, these percentages apply to nearly all U.S. imports from the targeted countries. It's a blunt instrument, and it instantly rewrote the math for businesses importing goods into the states. And just think about the massive scope of this. These are truly blanket, global tariffs hitting 60 different trading partners. I mean, we are talking about the heavy hitters of the global economy: India, China, Canada, Japan, Taiwan, Norway, and literally the entire European Union. It covers multiple continents, hitting America's closest allies right alongside its biggest economic competitors. The sheer volume of global trade caught in this July 24th net is exactly why we're seeing such a massive legal pushback. Moving on to Section 2, the White House defense. Let's look at how the government justifies this. The White House is vehemently defending the move, arguing these tariffs are 100% legal and, frankly, necessary. Their main shield, Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. The administration argues this specific, decades-old statute gives the executive branch the explicit authority to counter unfair trade practices. Essentially, they're pointing to this law and saying, look, this gives us the green light to act decisively and unilaterally when our trading partners are doing things that harm the U.S. So, what exactly is the unfair practice they're targeting this time around? Well, the administration's core argument is that these affected countries, all 60 of them, haven't done enough to stop goods produced with forced labor from bleeding into global supply chains. The federal government's stance is that these tariffs are an essential, necessary tool to combat the moral and economic crisis of forced labor globally. They're arguing that by slapping these sweeping duties on imports, they are actively fighting back against that illicit practice. But on to Section 3, the states push back. And wow, they are pushing back hard. A massive coalition of 25 U.S. states has teamed up to take the president to the U.S. Court of International Trade. This group is led largely by Democratic governors and state attorneys general. But think about that number for a second, 25. That is literally half the country joining forces to form a united legal front against the federal government's trade policy. It really highlights just how deeply this issue is shaking up state economies and local industries that desperately rely on imported goods. If we look directly at their court filing, these states aren't messing around. They have three very aggressive demands regarding those July tariffs. First, they want the court to explicitly declare the tariffs totally unlawful. Second, they're demanding an immediate halt to their implementation. Just stop the duties dead in their tracks. And third, which is a gigantic financial deal, they are demanding that the federal government actually refund the duties that have already been collected. So they don't just want to stop this going forward, they literally want to rewind the financial clock. The clash between these two arguments really hits the nail on the head when it comes to the core legal conflict. On the one hand, the administration says, hey, we are taking necessary legal action under Section 301 to fight forced labor. But the states? They're calling it a total pretext. The coalition argues the administration is simply using the forced labor issue as a convenient excuse to push through those sweeping blanket tariffs. Tariffs that, by the way, courts have previously said the president cannot just impose all on his own. It is a massive clash over the true intent and the actual limits of executive power. To really understand the state's argument, you gotta look at the phrase rational fit. The states are arguing in their brief that there is simply no rational fit between the specific, targeted problem of forced labor and the incredibly blunt application of global tariffs on almost all U.S. imports from 60 different nations. Their point is pretty straightforward. If you want to fix forced labor, you target the specific goods and specific regions where it's actually happening. Slapping a 10 or 12.5% tax on everything from Norwegian salmon to Taiwanese electronics, they argue, just doesn't logically or legally connect to the stated goal.
The 25 states absolutely did not mince words here. They summarized the administration's whole tariff regime with this stinging phrase: arbitrary, unlawful, and an abuse of presidential authority. Now, that is some incredibly strong legal language. By using those exact words, the states are making it clear they don't just see this as a bad trade policy. They are framing it as a severe, illegal overreach by the executive branch that the courts need to step in and fix immediately.
All right, let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, the global economic ripple. Because this whole situation isn't just about domestic courtrooms and import taxes. It is deeply, deeply intertwined with global currencies. Recently, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had to weigh in on the administration's strategy regarding Japan's struggling currency, the yen. And remember, Japan is one of those 60 countries getting hit by these new tariffs. So Secretary Bessent stepped up to clarify exactly how the U.S. is trying to navigate these super turbulent financial waters alongside its international partners.
Looking at his comments, Bessent made it clear the administration will do whatever it takes to support Japan's efforts to stabilize the yen. But he also threw out a pretty stark warning. He pointed out that a substantially undervalued yen could trigger a whole host of other economic problems. Specifically, he warned about the massive risk of unhealthy competitive devaluations across other currencies, basically a global race to the bottom. It just goes to show how fragile the whole system is right now. A tariff over here, a currency dip over there, and suddenly you've got massive international waves.
Which brings us to our final big picture question. As the courts in New York gear up to decide if the Trump administration can actually keep enforcing this global tariff regime, we really have to ask, how is this one single ruling going to reshape the entire global economy? Is it going to greenlight executive authority to just drop broad global tariffs whenever? Or will 25 states actually succeed in pulling that power back? The answer isn't just going to set American legal precedent. It is going to echo way beyond U.S. borders and could totally rewrite the rules of global commerce for decades to come. So you're definitely going to want to keep your eyes on New York.